A little bit too enthusiastic than me normally. Okay, here we go. So, first up, three of us would like to extend our heartfelt and sincerest thanks. We did not expect to get full house today on the last day of PAX. There's a battle going on over there. People are throwing computer things at people, and people came to see Mythology anyway. That makes them be off. I'm gonna cry. Okay, stop it. Okay. All right. First things first. There were some other mythologies circulating around PAX about, like, I've actually spoken with people at random. It's like, oh, hey, the mythology panel's going on at 3:30. Oh, who's doing that? I think it's the guy from Escapist. Oh, no, I heard it's Godzilla. You know, like, sorry. I'm going to introduce the three of us now. So we're doing mythology in and of games. Why? The Legend of Zelda is just as important as the Legend of Beowulf. Now, I wanted to let you guys know we're not just staying on those two topics. We're not just comparing one-to-one Zelda with Beowulf, because that's boring. Okay, no, we're going to be stepping back from the entire, basically looking at the medium of games in general, in relation to the medium of myth, or, well, I mean, mythology at large. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be teasing out some examples of how we sort of interpreted the way that mythology works in and through games. Actually, let me go to the next slide. So, robot roll call, real fast. The three speakers for today, in order of appearance. First up, we have Mr. Jonathan Padua. There's the Artist in Residence, Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. And he will be speaking to you about basically, what is mythology in general? What is it? Why is it important to us? And how has it existed until now? Until like the big thing which we're all waiting for, which is games. So on that note, our second speaker today is Mr. Thomas May III, hailing from Michigan State University, East Lansing. He is a games researcher. So the third speaker today is, it's just me. So my name is Christopher Michael Yap. You can just call me Chris. I am a games researcher also. I hail out of Nara Institute of Science and Technology in Japan. That's just a grad school, let the name fool you. I'm also a wannabe game dev. So we have a small game development studio called PAX Interactive. If you're interested later, I can just, like Ninja Star, throw you some business cards and stuff like that. Great. Okay, so without further ado, to let you know, this is the three of us, our first time at PAX speaking, so we would like to thank you again for that. And we were trying to come up with a spiffy name for our panel and the three of us. We were thinking, oh, Triple Dragon sounds good. It's like Double Dragon, but triple. And then, because we got Google now, we got to check, and it's apparently some Chinese restaurant. All right, so here we go. First up, we're going to have basically John speak about myth, Thomas about video games and myth, and myself, what does the future hold for mythology in games and this wonderful synergy that we got. And then afterwards, hopefully we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A, discussion, whatever. But even after that finishes, we do want to talk to you, so please come up to us afterwards if you've got time. All right, so Jonathan, if you please, thank you. Thank you.
Ooh. Hello, everybody. Hi, PAX.
Hi, Jonathan. Be nice, he's a virgin.
Yeah. That's for the very first time. This is a dream come true. To begin my section, I'd like to ask a personal question. Why is storytelling essential to us? Well, think about the most emotional moment you've ever had playing a video game, alone. No multiplayer or online component, just you and the game itself interacting. To be more specific, think of a time a game invoked a guttural connection in you, a moment of feelings and emotions so strong that it overwhelmed you, that you felt permanently changed by it. For some, the loss of a companion. Your horse Argo sacrificing himself as he traversed a crumbling bridge in the shadow of the Colossus.
Ooh, yeah. That's me too.
Or something recent, Elizabeth dancing in BioShock Infinite. For me, personally, it was Final Fantasy VII.
It's Kate Sid.
No, it was Aerys being killed by Sephiroth, as in killed. None of this resurrection stuff. Permanent death in a game where not much was permanent. That moment was really difficult for me, and for a while I refused to progress any further. Not because I was convinced I could bring her back. I tried. But because...
You just load an earlier save.
Yeah, I loaded an earlier save. But I had this overwhelming feeling that there was no point in continuing without her. And that's my point. For a lot of us here, a lot of that emotional resonance begins with story, which brings me back to my first question. Why is storytelling essential to us? On a functional level, storytelling is an accessible way for us to pass down history and knowledge. Much of history, in particular ancient history, is documented solely by stories and accounts of what transpired before. And when we relay history from the personal to the global, we don't refer to static moments. What we all naturally gravitate towards is to create a narrative of what happened. It is through narratives that we learn about our place in the world, by being told how we got here. Speaking of which, storytelling is also a way to preserve culture and identity. Indeed, the kinds of stories we tell, from myths to parables, dirty jokes, your mama jokes, to cautionary urban legends, reveal the staggering amount of diversity we still possess, even though we are more connected than ever before. Furthermore, we as a people, still my first time, as people are defined by the characters that inhabit the stories we tell. From Buddha, Emiliano Zapata, to Uncle Sam. How we feel about them, how we discover the qualities we admire or otherwise despise in them, brings me to stories also teach us morals and values. In a story, the characters we love and those we hate provide a sort of moral compass for us. We shape our lives around their examples. But it's not just the matter of showing us good versus evil, love in direct contrast to hate. Through stories, we can see what a society defines as good and what they define as evil. Say, a story of bravery and commitment in one country, like a man who sacrifices his personal life in order to move up the corporate ladder is seen as selfish and morally misguided in another. And I'll leave it up to you to figure out which one's which, but the idea is that morals and values are not universally shared, but rather culturally based, and stories help to show that distinction. But while all these points are great and essential, these aren't the kinds of things that come to mind when I think about why I have such a passion for stories. For me, why I love stories so much, and in particular, why I'm speaking to all of you today, is because of this. Despite all of our differences, stories connect us to one another.
And beer.
And beer. Delicious cold beer. But they also connect us to the world at large. Stories present the world in the way we want to see it. Stories are the realities we create for ourselves. And speaking of created realities, this brings me to my next point. One of the most enduring forms of storytelling is mythology.
Sorry, I was supposed to get you with sound effects, man. I'm sorry.
What's so special about mythology? What is that giant warm ball that moves across the sky and gives life and light to everything?
Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston. Zombie Whitney Houston. Or Apollo driving his golden chariot across the sky. Or why did the storm submerge the city of Atlantis under 100 feet of water? They must have angered Poseidon somehow. On a rational level, mythology serves to give order and explanation to the unknown. Unexplainable events that were beyond the grasp of human understanding were attributed to gods and goddesses, being similar to us and therefore relatable, but with capabilities far beyond the human scope. The gods wielded a mastery over the human unknown, and however crude, by translating phenomena into terms as we, as people, could understand, we also began to master the world around us. In addition to resembling us, the gods behaved like us as well. They had tempers and whims and romances, both requited and unrequited. They did this amongst each other and with the human race as well. And they were powerful, yes, but far from all powerful. Being similar to us, the gods of old were flawed, capable of errors and mistakes, just like us. So what did that mean for the common person? It meant that God and man should have shared a similar plane of existence. You could point to the sky or to the ground or to the ocean and know where the gods dwelled, in the same space and realm where you lived and breathed. And indeed, the distance between a common man and the gods was not impossible to traverse, and the gods themselves were far from infallible. And if someone were particularly determined, you could even defy the gods' will. In reference to Odysseus and Dante, an individual with enough determination could surmount the odds and change their fate prescribed by external forces. And looking back through history, I believe that is one of the most important things that mythology does for us as a means of storytelling, is that it gives some freedom and control in the world back to the human race. At the heart of it, mythology ultimately serves as a reminder that human beings are capable of shaping their own destinies. And empowering phrases like surmounting the odds and controlling our destiny could also be associated with the way we feel when engaged in a video game. Indeed, this is just one of the few vital places where mythology and video games share common ground. But what are the other connections? This brings me to my final section. Mythology being retold and reinvented in video games. It's no surprise that many video games, from Jittergrace to God of War, turn to mythology to provide narrative to gameplay. And why not? It's an almost irresistible resource. A ready-made story arc, vast world already imagined, a prepared cast of minor and major characters to populate it with. What is interesting, though, is how, in utilizing these classic myths, video game developers change these myths, retell classic tales, or integrate mythological references into original gameplay. Even more interesting is when a video game series, after years of constant innovation and reinvention, begins to create its own original mythology. And one of the more curious examples of retelling, and in this case, radical revamping of mythology, can be found in the Dynasty Warriors series. The series commonly takes gods and historical figures from Asian folklore and turns them into army-leading generals, which is already a unique reinvention itself. But among the more radical changes was the transformation of Nara, the ancient Chinese goddess known as the half-female, half-snake creationist that formed and populated the world. The classical one is on your left. The game developers at Koei, right. Yeah, I have to check with Chris to make sure I'm saying it right. Reimagined her. I was going to say Koi, but that's way off. Reimagined her into what you could call your standard female warrior protagonist, for better or worse. Despite the overall, however, it is directly implied that Nara, in-game and on official websites, is indeed the same goddess from folklore. Where and how this change occurred is not explained, or maybe even important. But regardless, one of the positive effects of this is that a population and generation are able to gain some insight and information into a relatively unheard of ancient mythology that would have gone unnoticed otherwise. Other characters from classical mythology retain a more recognizable form, but are otherwise integrated into the game in a wholly new way. In the Final Fantasy series, summons are a common form of spellcasting, and often these summons are named and designed after various mythological gods and creatures from a variety of cultures. One of the most ubiquitous summons in the series is Odin, Norse allfather. Though he undergoes an alteration of sorts, I'm not sure where he got the horns. Dear. He is somewhat recognizable. What is different here, I should note, is that Odin, powerful god, has been more or less reduced to a boss, and then reduced to a spell. So, what does incorporating existing mythology add to video games? I believe they're an easy way, or a complex way, to add depth. When you see a character from a mythology, it creates a kind of connection between the in-game world and possible worlds outside of it. You have an idea that what is on your screen is not all that there is to the game. And for the player who is familiar with these references, it creates richness. It sparks the imagination and opens up the possibility of greater meaning than what exists in the game itself. But what's even more fascinating is when video games break free from mythological standards and begin creating brand new mythologies of their own. To illustrate my point, 2 examples come to mind. First, the name Cid, C-I-D, for the 5 people who don't know, is familiar to most of us here. He's one of the most famous characters in the Final Fantasy series and has undergone radical transformation and role changes as the series progressed. But what hasn't changed is his relationship with machinery, technological mastery, and of course the ever-present airship, which is noteworthy because Final Fantasy is a series that mostly concerns magic. And so, with the audience knowing this association, every passing incarnation of Cid becomes far more than just a man, or rather, a recurring video game character. His various roles in the series almost become symbolic. Say the name Cid, and a flurry of associations start to come to mind. Airship, tinker, inventor, engineer. Like the gods of Greek and Roman mythology, Cid becomes a representation of something, the might and power of human innovation in a magic-populated world. My second example is not of a person or a character, but rather a symbol that I am certain we are all familiar with here. It is quite possibly the most iconic created mythology in video game history. And though it borrows some material from other myths, the Triforce is a unique mythological symbol solely created for a video game. Like the Final Fantasy series, over the years the meaning of the Triforce has become elaborate and encompassing. It unifies the entire series. And in doing so, the Triforce no longer becomes an object to be found that wields a sort of great generic power. It becomes a source of meaning. When you think of the Triforce, you think things like power, courage, wisdom, maybe even light, depending on how old you are. But what's interesting to me, especially when talking about the Triforce, is how the Triforce mythology has weaved its way into the physical world. How many people here have Zelda tattoos, Zelda-themed tattoos? 1, 2, yeah, more than you, not as bad. But there's tons of Zelda fans here. I was at a bar in Brooklyn, and a woman showed me the elaborate Triforce tattoo that covered her entire back. It was beautiful. The wing design spanned her entire shoulder blades, and I asked her, I had the guts to actually, asked her why she chose the Triforce for such a commitment. And I expected things like, the design is nice, or I like the video game. But she surprised me with her response. She simply said, I try to live my life according to their ideals. So yes, mythology and video games have deep connections with one another. Where does the gamer fit in all of this? Earlier I mentioned that one of the most important purposes of mythology is to remind ourselves of human capability. And I believe this applies to the video gamer as well. And I believe this is the most central aspect that connects video game and mythology. The gamer. The gamer is larger than life. It goes beyond his or her own capabilities, far beyond the reach of the average human being. Like mythology also does, it is a reminder of perseverance. No matter what video game you're playing, there's a constant lesson to be learned. That with enough determination, the impossible can be achieved. And to me, personally, that is the most significant connection between storytelling, mythology, and video gaming. That feeling of taking an active role in a narrative. That feeling of participating in history. That feeling of being beyond your normal self. This is what we're talking about today, and I predict what we'll be talking about in the future as long as there are people like you, people still playing video games, and caring about the video games that they play. So, where do we go from here? I don't know exactly. We're just getting started. The possibilities are endless. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to take a little bit more of a deep dive into some specific game examples. We have Mr. Thomas May III of Michigan State University.
So, how y'all doing? Good. Good. Awesome. So, why don't I go ahead and get started? Myths have been around for a very, very long time. And through those times, there have been many ways that myths have been told. One way was word of mouth. Stories of whimsy and such were passed down from generation to generation, or in more intimate settings, such as a group like this, even to something more intimate as father-son time, father-son story time. With print media, it actually expands the life of these myths, which also made it more widely available to those who aren't near the region of origin. Nowadays, we read these myths in a formal setting, such as a school, maybe at work for some reason, or at home. As technology advances, so has ways of telling these myths. Television movies provide a better sensory experience that you don't get with books. As technology expands even further, we have a more recent platform for telling these myths. Games. The interesting thing about games is that it provides one thing that the last few mediums can never provide: interactivity. The character and the player share a journey in a new way that other medias cannot provide. Dante's Inferno was based off the first book of the Divine Comedy, the Inferno. Within the game, you get pieces of Dante's life. Why is he on the path that he's on? Where did he come from? And where he may be going. Who here is familiar with the Divine Comedy in any way? Awesome. Okay. So you all know, if you read the poem, played the game, or both, either or, you know that it's been retooled in such a way where it's a drastic difference. Very drastic difference. For example,
I think they look the same.
I
I think the left is kind of intimidating.
I don't know, he probably like mess somebody up real bad. Anyway, Dante's occupation, who he was, even the time that he was born, even the time that each medium took place, drastically different. These were made for the scope of the game. Same with Beatrice. She was a minor character in the actual poem, but in the game itself, she gave Dante an objective. The reason why he was going through hell, the reason why he had to go through all those trials. And also, there were changes that weren't as drastic. Virgil's role in both the poem and the game, not very big, wow. Not very big, but he was still Dante's guide through the Inferno. Now, when I say weaponization of the poem, I only refer to two things about Dante in the game. The fact that one, he's a man of faith, and two, he's a soldier. What this does, it creates an interesting mechanic that represents the balance between faith and violence. Throughout the game, you run into enemies that you can either absolve or punish to collect experience points, respectively. So, why change something? Why change something so drastically? Why would you make Dante a soldier and Beatrice his fiance and have him fight Lucifer? Spoilers.
No.
Well, even though the story is still there, Dante does traverse the 7 layers of hell. He does run to Lucifer. He does tour with Virgil. But if the game was exactly like the poem, would it be as fun? How would you transfer something like that into a game? Could it be a telltale game like Walking Dead or something like Myst? Also, what it does is it gives a player a different point of view of classic literature. Weaponizing it makes it an action platformer, but it may inspire curiosity for the player who has never heard of the Divine Comedy or has never read it. Speaking of curiosities, how many of you know anything about Buddhist mythology, Buddhist/Hindu mythology? Anything? Okay, let's assume, for the hell of it, let's assume that not many people know anything about it. What Asura's Wrath does is introduces it for the player who may not know much about it or who's thinking about it for the first time. And with mixed sci-fi elements, it makes it pretty, to be honest, it was like ridiculously epic for no reason, but we did that. But what is an Asura anyway? Well, according to Buddhist myth, he was basically a dick. But
That wasn't in your script.
He was known to have a bad temper, always wanted to fight, jealous of the gang, all that. Basically the vices of humanity. He was more or less a representative of that. However, the Asura in the game, there's a contrast to him. Did he fight? Yes. Was he angry? Yes. He spent 98% of the game pissed off about something. But the difference is that he was more focused. He had a focus to his anger. He had something to protect, i.e. his daughter. On the other hand, you had August, his mentor, his teacher, talking about a fight. His personality was more related to the Asura of myth. Fight for the hell of it, drink wine, just get drunk, girls, all that stuff. Interesting enough, he was actually the early design concept for Asura, which is why they look so much freaking alike. Symbolism in Buddhist art is a staple. If you've ever seen art with like about the deities that have multiple arms, well, there's a point to that. Apparently, the more arms a deity has, the more power and reach that they have. So you see Asura, a low-tier deity, he has 6 arms, while Canon, Goddess of Mercy, has 1,000 arms. Now, throughout Asura, before the fight starts, they go to this DBZ style power up where they go from the flames. There's a point to that too. Apparently, in Buddhist art, when there is a fight being predicted, they're usually covered in flames. Apparently, the bigger the flame is around the person, the stronger that they are. Like Dragon Ball Z fight, why not? Also, within the game, you notice that the deities have halos behind them when they get ready to fight. Big halo appears behind them. Well, the halo is seen in Buddhist art as well as Christian art, and it's a big symbol of enlightenment. The characters in Asura's Wrath have a similar characteristic to statues, to Buddhist statues. As you can see, when Asura goes into fighting mode, his arms are covered in this golden metallic covering, similar to the statue you see in this picture. And it's also interesting, when they fight, they don't bleed or get bruised as much as they crack. Like any statue that has, like a statue that's been around for like hundreds of years and withstand the wear and tear of time. Even during high point fights, you notice that when they perform strenuous activity, there's like a creaking noise. Imagine if the Statue of Liberty moved or something, that strange creaking noise that they do like they're arrested or something. So, what's more? What's the point? Well, like I mentioned before, it introduces a new medium to players who may not know anything about it, and similar to Dante's Inferno, it may inspire curiosity into the player to look more into Buddhist mythology. This threw me off, to be honest. I wonder why Asura had mechanical parts in a game that's like took place thousands of years ago, but somehow it worked. And then there's the spaceships. What I noticed, the humans represented in the game looked at the spaceships as heavenly bodies to be worshipped as much as they worship the gods. But to players, they're just spaceships.
Wait, really? Like, are you saying it's aliens?
I'm not saying that, but okay. Okay.
Never heard of this game.
Okay. I'm sure everyone in here has heard about once or twice, maybe at school, on TV, about Greek myths. Well, Greek myth is pretty familiar. It's an old world. Interesting thing about God of War is that it introduces something new into the old world. Kratos. Now, we all know who Kratos is. So, general, God, general badass, whatever. But the interesting thing about Kratos is that he's the embodiment of human will in direct competition with fate. As like any anti-hero, he's experienced tragedies in his life that has shaped him into the man that he is and the man that he's going to be. Kratos makes an interesting impact on the Greek world of myth. Throughout the games, if you play God of War, you run into well-known characters, and for some reason or another, they hate Kratos for whatever reason. For example, in God of War 2, Kratos encounters Icarus, who didn't die from falling into the water, he just went nuts. Decides to start stuff with Kratos and gets his wings stolen. In God of War 3, you fight Hercules. Hercules is jealous of all the praise that Kratos is getting from Zeus. Hercules figured, if I beat him, I'll get all this praise. It ends up with his face beaten in and his gauntlet stolen. Atlas in Chains of Olympus, Kratos runs into Atlas, and Kratos tricks Atlas into holding up the earth, which is something that we all know him for. There's also symbolism with the relics in the game. These are the symbolism. The relics in the game are an amalgamation that grant the player certain skills. In real life, I don't think the Golden Fleece deflected attacks. I'm not sure that's why Jason was trying to look for it. So, what's so special about him? Like I said, he's a new character in the old world. He seems to be seamlessly folded into what a Greek hero is. Though he may not be canon, it's still pretty interesting about how his appearance and how he is and how he does with the word itself. As a kid, you read books and you wonder, in your mind, you have an idea of what certain things look like. But see an actual physical interpretation of it, such as a movie, a cartoon, it was also pretty cool. And like I mentioned before, somehow it all evolves around Kratos. Him being the son of Zeus, him causing all this destruction and everything. Somehow Kratos is responsible, and somehow it evolves around him. It evolves around him. Believe it or not, these three characters actually teach us something. Each of these characters has experienced a great loss at some point in their life, which sets them on the path that they're on. And with this great loss, they use it as motivation to finish their journey and reach their goals, which isn't easy. There are obstacles in the way for the sole purpose of deterring them from their goals. And each character has denied a truth or a fact that was supposed to be held true at the time. Kratos rejected the idea that the gods were infallible. Dante rejected the idea that he was beyond redemption. Asura rejected the idea of worshiping gods, even if it meant he wasn't worshiping himself. As a player, you get in on everything. You get in on their journey, their tragedies, their hardships, but you also share in their victories, which makes it that much sweeter. So, let's say in 100 years from now, how will people back then interpret the new myths that we created through games, like we interpreted old myths through games? Will there be a new platform to tell these myths? Will Link be a girl for some reason? Will Mario and the princess have kids finally? Well, for some reason they make Samus a guy. I don't think so either. The rate of this change is unknown. Whether or not it'll happen, it's a possibility. How much of it, as I mentioned, no one knows. Old establishments have been around for thousands of years. I say 30 years for the new ones. It's not a bad start. Thank you.
Up today. I'm your third speaker. Once again, my name is Chris Yap. I am from Nara Institute of Science and Tech, and I'm also a producer at a really small indie game dev group called Planebox out in Japan. And so what I'm going to be talking to you today is I'm going to follow off of my fellow colleagues' talks about, what is mythology in general, why is it important, how has mythology been reinterpreted through games that have been coming out recently. My talk is going to be about where do we take that, and why I'm super enthused about that. I get profanely enthused about that. I hope that doesn't highlight me. I don't want to expert too much. But anyway, all right, let's get right into it, shall we? Okay, this is a myth. Okay, it's just a myth. There's I have done that at a presentation of a research conference once, and What had happened was the speaker before me, all the slides were compiled onto one file, so the speaker before me, he alt-tabs out of the presentation, like at the last slide, everyone sees the blue screen and goes, don't you know alt-tabs, how to get away with like cheating at work? Okay, so here we go, Littlest Dragon Boy. As my fellow colleagues had already mentioned, myth is important, and oh my God, like I did not expect to see this many people today, so I know for a fact that demographically speaking, myth is important, so thank you. Transmission of values is an important thing for myth. Myths have been reinvigorated by games, and that is an awesome thing. So what next, you know? My contention here is that games are the digital mythology of the 21st century, and probably beyond, and I really hope so. And why is that? I think that's because the goals of myth are best served by games, actually. Let's talk about the goals of myth real quick. Basically, as John had mentioned, transmission of values. We're trying to pass what we believe is good and bad onto like future generations, or maybe just tell a really cool story to other people and maybe they like it and just spread it around, you know? Now, the great thing about games is that, obviously, as all of you know, players are not passive observers. We are active participants, and that's what gets our blood really going here. Ownership or authorship of the tale transitions then to you, the player. The player manifests as the hero. It's not Link doing this thing, it's actually you doing this thing. And therefore, the myth then becomes your epic story, your epic struggle as the player. Okay? Who can relate to this photo? Anybody? A few of you, sometimes. This is me all the time. Now, I told you already, I'm a games researcher, and the reason is because that left thing, I don't know, that sort of zombie-looking guy, that's me basically whenever it comes to studying things, and then when it's game time, I'm on it. So what I was thinking with my basically grad school career was, hey, you know what, let's just friggin' study games. Then I could just mash the two together. I could do what I love for a living. I could live, like, basically learn about study time, then becomes, you know, that gentleman on the right who, again, this guy's way more intense than me, actually. It's kind of along the same lines as this. This is one of my favorite memes. This is the scumbag meme. I post one once a week on Facebook. Remembers every single mission from a game you've played 4 years ago. I can't remember a single math formula. And it's really perilous for a guy at an engineering college. It's terrible. But it's absolutely true. Like, if the professor had instead said, like, you know what, instead of taking your test, why don't you tell me how to get through, like, you know, how do you get into the base in Metal Gear Solid? Yeah. So, here we go. That's the power of games for me, basically. My contention in words is basically that immersive properties of game worlds and those things that make it fun and awesome are essentially going to become the power to create indelible narrative experience, or in this case, digital mythology. That's sort of what I'm going for in my study, my PhD, and things like that. Now, basically, games are way better than static media due to the game's ability to have an exploratory, simulation-capable world. Like, even games like Minecraft are way better at telling stories. Why? Because you are in a simulated world that's interactive, you're sort of there, the game gives you things, and then your mind just pieces it together. I mean, how many have played Minecraft? I am going to adopt your way of answering questions from now on. Next research meeting. Who did their homework? Minecraft. The great thing about Minecraft, if you've played Minecraft and you tell somebody about what you did in Minecraft, you don't say, I moved the mouse this way and I hit W this way and then I was actually, like, you know, making this command happen. You don't say it like that. You say, I built this house and a creeper came and destroyed everything I worked for. And you smile and cry inside. Creeper. I saw a creeper, by the way, at PAX. Did anybody see the creeper? He was awesome. Yeah. He was chasing people in the hall, hissing at them. Is he in the room right now, by the way? Okay, so games for mythology and stories in general are great because they simultaneously convey both the core story that, supposing there is a core story. Again, Minecraft, no core story, but in the case of like God of War, or Dante's Inferno, or Final Fantasy, there is a sort of core story that the director or the writer is trying to get through to you as the player. And have you experience that by either, you know, moving along in their footsteps or becoming them, essentially. The other thing that they do at the same time is you get to explore a whole bunch of what-if scenarios in your game. Way better than reading Homer's The Odyssey, or, God forbid, Withering Freaking Heights. No, seriously, okay, sorry. Sorry. English literature major originally. So, all right, thank you. Never, like nobody ever goes. We're very mild. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, modern examples of mythology through games are really great, and they do get they completely get me all crazy. But frankly, we can kick way more ass than that. I'm serious. Oh, well, I didn't mean to advance it that fast. PAX has been great. I need to give you guys a small aside. Okay, so this is my first PAX, and this is the first time that, thank you. I made this slide before I came to PAX, and I sincerely believed in it at that time, but now I really believe in it, because the PAX environment for me personally in these last 3 days has been basically this. Hey, welcome to a place where you can get super enthusiastic about whatever it is you like, and everyone's cool with that and loves it. You know, thank you for that. Thank you for showing me that. It's been such a long time since I've seen that. And you know what? I made this slide before PAX. We can kick more ass. And after seeing that, I really believe that now. We can kick way more ass than I originally thought. It's even better. These are our legends. These are our epic struggles, and I'm not even joking. It kind of looks a little bit exaggerated, but yeah. These are our odes to the fallen. I have to tell you, okay, again, sorry, spoiler alert. Metal Gear Solid 3, I'm a bit old. The last scene when you gotta kill the boss, you know? They put the button in your hand, it's just like, okay, the game's never gonna finish. Snake! Filming. I have this gentleman over here filming. Thank you very much. This is the best conference I've ever done. I mean, I could not press the button, so I just thought maybe if I let it go, it's going to give me a different ending. Kojima. Maybe put blood on my hands. Lastly, video games as mythology are our songs of victory. Again, I'm old. I always retreat back to Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. I'm sorry, I'm still a bit blasphemy. I was 12. I was 12 years old the first time I beat Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past on the original Super NES. It was a pretty crappy time in my life. I didn't want to go to school. Not because I didn't like learning or anything, it's just that I didn't like the people that were there. And I didn't know why they didn't like me. I could come home after school and play Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. And I felt like I achieved something. I felt like I really did save 2 whole worlds. And I wasn't a loser. The truth was I never was a loser. None of you guys are, nobody is. But this was the thing, this was the myth that actually was the first thing that actually get through to me, to actually make me realize that I wasn't a loser. And your parents can tell you stuff, like, hey, you know, you're my baby, I love you. You know, other people, friends would be like, don't worry, it's all right, but if I could prove to myself for a second that I can actually save the world just for a little bit, that was like the best thing for me. And I still go back to this when I'm stressed out. Sorry, I didn't mean to, you know, crazy cry on you guys, but I just didn't expect there to be more than 7 people here. I'm sorry. This is our time, so let's make the best of it. I'm serious. Let me give you a little thing here. You guys maybe have seen this model of the human brain before. You know, on the left side, you've got a lot of like circuitry. It's basically fires whenever you're doing things that are related to logic and reason and order and analysis, science control. You know, and then on the right-hand side, you guys like me, basically, who are like, you know, that fires when we have things like freedom, creativity, passion, chaos. Or it's like, chaos, imagination, feeling, and things like that. And, you know, this is sort of, I don't really know if anyone's proven that this is the model or anything, but this tends to be great. Okay, so, you know what? I didn't make the slide. But when I was, you know, basically
trying to sort of make this slide, I was thinking, shoot, I want to put a pillar, like 2 pillars of words on either side of our brain to like talk about this. It's kind of boring. I was like, shoot, what kind of like other visuals can I use? Like maybe a character, but nothing really came to mind, So my contention here is, if you remember that sort of brain thing, games in my understanding seem to be, for me anyways, stories plus technology. Or in other words, if you're doing the brain thing, it's basically creativity, the really great wellspring of creativity that comes from the human soul, added or working in concert with the ingenuity that is so impressive and that just keeps giving me hope for the human race. We keep coming out with new stuff all the freaking time. And then, like, there are artists, they're great. There are engineers, they're great. Sometimes they don't talk to each other the best way. And I know this is my hardest because I'm an artist at an engineering school. It's awful. If you work on an indie game team or if you're in a AAA studio, how many artists and engineers you get, like, talking to each other? It's like they're not even talking to each other. Anybody? Oh, somebody thinks it.
We got those people together.
Yeah, basically, it's just like, what's going on? But the best thing is that, in my opinion, games are the place that we can make this happen in such a, like, the really best way. This is the digital mythology of our time. And to end off, I wanted to share with you guys one of my favorite quotes that sort of gets to the heart of this. Charlie Chaplin, the great dictator, 1940. Again, I'm kind of old, so. But I will preface this by saying, look, if you guys on YouTube, if you got a minute, check it out. Charlie Chaplin, the Great Dictator speech. It'll probably just pop up in Google. It's the most wonderful, inspiring. I have it on my iPod. I listened to it before this thing happened. Anyway, the aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness of men, cries out for the universal brotherhood, the unity of the soul. And I think that games do that too. In fact, I think games are the most blatant expression of this. Games are like, hey, I want to have fun. I want to have a safe place to have fun, and I want people to feel good about it. Let's use technology and let's smack that with creativity and let's do something great. And I know a game developer who really gets this. It's Genova Chen, the creator of Journey, that game company. You play Journey? Yeah! And you have been on a wonderful journey here. And I was very fortunate to have seen his talk at GDC 2013, which thankfully at the GDC Vault is now free. You can check this talk out. Check out Genova Chen, Postmortem Journey, or Making Journey probably it was called. And he said at the very end of his wonderful, wonderful, wonderful presentation, this is what life is about. We are only here for such a short amount of time. We all happen to all be living in the same era. So let's help each other. Let's make each other's lives better. And that's what I think as a game developer, that's the best thing that we can do. And that's why I love making games. And right now I'm just in a mini, super small startup wannabe indie game company, but I feel that so much. And I want to keep riding that motivation when I make my game, whatever it is. Even if it fails, as long as I made it along those lines, I will be completely happy with myself. And I hope that maybe for some kid out there, he gets a kick out of it too. That's what I want, and I think that's what games can do for us. The three of us up here, I kind of cobbled them together, but we came, it was kind of like half-assed Nick Fury, you know? Like, oh, you have the power, yeah, don't do some further. You have the power of stuff, you know? The three of us, we have this dream where games of the future allow the flexible telling of an infinite number of mythologies. That which reflects the infinite cumulative experiences of life, told in such an engaging, interactive way that the tale of all humanity can not only be learned, but enjoyed. So what? Why is that even important? Mythology is just tall tales, not the make believe. If this cat is to be believed, I'm absolute trouble. I still firmly believe in it. Just because it's not, because it's fiction, doesn't mean it ain't real. Okay, granted, this isn't your life. No. Life is a story that, in my opinion, is also a game, which happens to be a story and is life again. If we were talking about sort of like samsara, this is my samsara that I follow. And in that case, you know what? This might be your life. Of course, you're not a guy with a rod and a bow and trying to fight something that's the size of a building. No, you're just you. And you're up against your greatest fear. Never
never heard such wondrous applause at employment applications. Unless it was like Google, you got hired. But actually, to be in all honesty, my 3 greatest fears in life are, finding a job. Number 1, sharks and aliens. The other 2 are like the most common ways to die. But okay, so again, bringing this down again. Maybe, in your life, your story, your epic quest, maybe you're fighting, this thing just makes me sick, actually. Like, I just feel so sick when I have to think about, shoot, okay, you got a PhD at some point, then what are you going to do? Wait for a professor to die? But I mean, like, that's the future. It's like, oh God, so I need to know that this is an epic quest that I can win. Maybe, again, like I'm going to talk about it again, maybe the big thing that you need to slay is bullying. And I know that as, video game enthusiasts who, thankfully we're I feel like we're in a golden age right now where subculture is like the awesome thing to be. Like, before it was like, oh, I have to hide the fact that I like anime, But like, now it's just like, shoot, if you cosplayed super well, it's like, holy shit, that guy is awesome, right? I want to get a picture with that guy. Things weren't like that back then, so, I had bullying. Okay, maybe. Maybe the big monster you need to slay in life is bullying. And I can't tell you enough how much games saved my life on this. And I think it has really enthused a lot of you guys as well. And my main message, I think I just want to leave with you guys is that I think that you guys really rock. And I want to see whatever it is that you're working on in a game, I want to see it. Whatever costume you put together, I want to see it. I want to see how you've been inspired by the mythology in games. Because I am too. And that's pretty freaking awesome. So, the mythology in and of games is really just there to remind us that we have the strength and goodness in ourselves to win. Real quick, if you want to contact us, this is where you can find us. Basically, Jonathan Padua again, he's an artist in residence, New York. Thomas May III, Michigan State University. Myself, I'm Chris Yap. If you guys like Japan things, let me know. smartbat@gmail.com. Super last announcement before we get to the questions. Thank you for queuing. I have a sad story for you. I bought one of those awesome Legend of Zelda Master Swords, downstairs. And guess what? I gotta fly international tomorrow. The thing does not fit in my suitcase. Now, here's the thing now. Alright, I don't want some Japanese customs agent to have it because he doesn't know what the fuck it is. I want one of you to have it. And I want to give it to the person in this room who is youngest. Yeah! Listen, little guy, it's dangerous to go alone. In the absence of actual children, I was going to say, okay, best question instead, but that's way more dry. Okay, so we're open up to questions. So, and for any one of us, or in general, that's fine. We got about 6 more minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so this may be real quick. As games researchers, do you guys know any really good or successful, maybe a successful game that rejected the myth cycle and was story driven? Didn't have to necessarily conform to that myth cycle.
Okay, so when you, I'm sorry, did everyone hear the question okay? Do I need to repeat? Okay, so, you know, what kind of successful game, do I know of any examples of game researchers, successful game that sort of break hero cycle? Are you talking about like Joseph Campbell's hero cycle, like the Star Wars hero cycle?
Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Hero with 1,000 Faces hero cycle? Or just the general, okay, gotcha.
The classical heroes.
Generally speaking, fundamentally, games as being fundamentally interactive kind of have to break it on that level. But if you're talking about just like hero arcs and things like that, a lot of games do follow that one. I think the sort of modern tragedy style RPGs, like maybe The Last of Us or something, would probably be a bit that ends, like anything that ends with like a downer tends to be against that model, especially if the hero passes away at the end or fails in some fashion. Actually, you know what, let's talk some more afterwards because I do have some examples, they're not coming to my mind from all the John, anything?
Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption.
Oh, Red Dead. Especially as sandbox games, open world games like that, they tend not to. It's emergent narrative games like Minecraft and things like that. Those completely don't fit the hero cycle, but like Final Fantasy VII tends to follow that pretty closely, unless of course you know. Thank you for your question. Thank you. But let's talk later. Hi.
Hello. I don't have a question. I just want to give you a high five.
Thank you. Thank you.
And they're all sweaty from being nervous.
So you guys talked a lot about how, you know, mythology is changing, how it kind of belongs to us and we're a part of the game and the story. How does that relate to intellectual property laws? How can these be our stories when they're all owned by corporations?
That is a very good question.
That's a very good question. That's future research. And then, typical research answer. Actually, John or Tom, do you want to start off?
I'm still formulating my
Okay.
response.
Actually, in regards to like intellectual property rights and things, and like I think we were contending more along the lines of every time you play through a game, that's sort of your experience. It's kind of a private, subjective thing in terms of like what is your personal mythological or hero story experience through a game. In terms of like authoring your own, like for example, like maybe Machinima is probably a good example, right? Where basically people are constructing their own stories using other people's games assets and like filming things happening. That is a really complicated question. I tend to think that what is the normal operating thing? Like sometimes companies will just get pissed about that and then seek the person out. I'm actually not too sure.
Yeah, I mean, most manga and fan works and stuff pretty much operate on the idea that you just kind of become complicit or tell you to shut it down. So
yeah, that's true. In that case, like so, for example, like I think that the indie game scene, especially in the West, is really pioneering that whole spirit of free creativity and then having those sort of like your personal story, especially even if it is a rendered game in that sense. And then the AAAs tend to crack down on that just because they have legal departments and they were told it.
I'll make a life nightmare and try to make it even
That is a really great question. I wanna ponder that some more.
That could be a panel.
Yeah, I wanna do it. Okay.
see you fine.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, can I talk to you later? Thanks. That'd be really great.
Intellectual property.
Thanks so much for doing this. I think it was awesome for you guys. A lot of people showed up, especially if you weren't showing up. You pretty much all been talking about the singular factor of games as being interactivity and participation. Now, in Homeric era Greece, I'm pretty sure that if somebody, some dad tells his kids the story of Hercules, probably within the next half hour they were going to be outside arguing about which one of them was going to get to be Hercules. Probably.
Yeah.
How do you feel? That participatory element of recreating the story or altering the story is weird. How do you feel that jives with the whole notion that now video games introduce this new interactivity?
That's a really awesome question because I love panels because you end up getting things you never thought about. John or Thompson, do you want to lead off on that one?
Oh, okay, me? Alright. Well, like you mentioned, with kid would play Hercules, everyone would play their own version of the story that they told or whatever. I think it's really, as far as games go, I think it's really dependent on what scope you want to put it in. Does that make sense?
Well, give an example.
Well, like you said with Dark Days Inferno, or the Alice in Wonderland game, or any other game where it deviates from the source material in some way, shape, or form. It has to fit, but they deviate, but they keep the bare bones of what it is, what the story is about. Like Dark Days Inferno, yeah, he went through the 7 layers of hell, but he wasn't a soldier, he was just a poet. I heard that basically the Divine Comedies were like the world's first fan fiction, like because of the elements in it. So, like I said, it really depends on what scope you're trying to go for.
Actually, on that note, yeah, I don't think the father's going to tell the son all about Dante and how I hope I can be an awesome poet. Like, I think in regards to your question, like, you know, how does that sort of like, okay, so for example, games, especially these days, can be distributed over the internet, and it's an indelible, sort of lasting digital experience that you can sort of re-experience anytime you want. With play, I tend to think that, I mean, I'm generalizing, I'm really sorry, but I tend to think of that in relation to games as being something that people tend to leave behind, like playing outside and sort of role-playing, unless you are an awesome member of D&D, which I love, you know. But games, I think, tend to be, especially in modern society, viewed as like, oh yeah, adults play games, especially like people who are sort of in this age range now.
They're now starting to
that
way. For a long time, they're staying. I'm going to jump a little bit and answer my own question in some part and give you guys a thought, which is that the game allows you to unify the experience of telling the story to somebody and allowing them to vary the story at the same time. Because previously, the example I gave was the cycle. I tell you the story, now you go replay the story, maybe you change it. The game allows you to synthesize those two events so that you create your own version of the story at the same time that the story is being told to you. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Did
you guys have any time to get these ones?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very quickly. So historically, myths have a reflective quality to them where the society builds mythology.
Okay.
Now, from our modern perspective, we have this gift where we could have a creative force with our mythology, where the mythology is able to influence and build society. Can you talk a little bit about the potentials for games for doing that?
Oh boy.
Okay, you know what? We're gonna don't take liberties with it. Okay, okay, no. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can actually not answer it, but just talk to it, because I think that is what you basically brought up is what and I think the three of us really want to happen with the games as a medium being like a very cyclical thing. Where now, exactly, we can now make our own mythologies based on the new sort of ubiquitous technology, open source things. Unity is great like that. How do I answer it? Well, I'm in full support of that, and I'm actually on a epic like crusade to actually talk to this more in Japan. Because it's weird. In the West, it seems to be an extremely like okay thing to think that like adults making games and doing games is a completely like valid, significant pastime. But in Japan, it really is just relegated to the entertainment role. So I do often hear that why are you even bothering talking about mythology, which is really classical things, in the same light as games, you know? And it's weird because Japan's really good at putting them out, but they just don't look back on them in the way that would create that really great cycle. You know, I could be wrong on that, but I tend to see that up there. That's how I'm going to discuss it real quick, but if we could talk later, that'd be really awesome. Yeah, thanks. We have time for left. I think you might be the last one, maybe. Ed, are we good? Or? Two more. Okay, go ahead, sir.
I'm a third-year PhD student in bioinformatics, so in my case, like, when things just aren't going well, which is all the time,
I just started the PhD, wait.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just did.
Oh, okay, well, it's fantastic. I like to relax by playing video games, but since your research actually involves this, and somehow like playing video games and turning like your research and then I don't know, like, I don't know how I would like relax if my pastime is also what I'm using my research in.
It kind of goes through cycles like that, where basically I'll get so sick of seeing a game, but it's like I have to do it. But in that case, it's cool because I can actually turn to like a different genre tends to do it for me. You know, just like stepping out of the genre. Because as you know, like grad level research is extremely specific, especially when you're in the master's beforehand. With the PhD, you spread out a little bit more. But as long as I can jump to like a genre that's on the opposite end of the spectrum from things, then I can get a little bit more refreshed in that case, yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Final?
Yes.
Okay, cool. A lot of cool ideas. Thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
Sweet. But noticing a theme, you talked about a lot of cool mythologies like Buddhism that are more on the peaceful side, and Christianity, a little in between. There's sort of a theme with how these games got recreated, like Dante's Inferno and God of War, which is they really add this sort of guttural violence to the game, and sort of like twist, like Dante's Inferno. It's like about Christian morals.
Yeah.
And now it's about sort of like these violent murders with this massive bone cycle. It's so like guttural. Like, is that like a good direction for games to take? Sort of this guttural thirst.
I think that's interesting, and I think obviously their popularity. I think when you look at things, I saw a panel that was talking about fantasy, and earlier fantasy movies were not nearly as violent as like the Game of Thrones is now. It's really violent, and I think Game of Thrones is alright. It's alright, but I think it's reflective of like the society that perpetuates it, and so I think these things kind of come and go in cycles, and I think, and that's what's happening with video games, and I think it's. I'm not sure what the future will hold. I do think it will change. I think things change. I think they'll get an oversaturation of violence, and we may be on the verge of it right now. And I think that maybe if we talk about video games 20 years in the future, we might be thinking about, oh, those games back in the past actually be violent. That's just my take. But I was thinking about the violence of video games as well.
First, I want to thank you for that question because it was something that did come up when we were formulating this panel. All of the games we got are basically hyper-violent versions of their originals, right? So, is violence is going in the violent direction in order to sell a game title that's based on a mythology a good thing to do? Inherently, it is not. I don't think that, I don't know, like Thomas, you don't really agree that it was a better tale because of the violence, do you? What was your point? It's more along the lines of...
It's really along the lines of the interpretation. Now, because of the fact that, I guess at the time that Dante's Inferno took place during the Third Crusade, that I believe they had to, I guess, make it that violent based on that. Maybe they used it to try to justify the violence in the game, probably. Saying that we got a war, a lot of effed up things happen.
But actually, hypothetically speaking to his question, it's like, hypothetically speaking, what if the design team had decided with Dante's Inferno to be very true to the source material and just make it, as he said, into like a Christian values game, or like, I think there's a lot of political satire in the Inferno. Basically, like half the people he meets in hell are like politicians that nobody knows, and like these are the people he just hated, so he wrote them into hell, does it make for a video game that sells well? Probably not in this day and age. But again, do we want to contend that good myths and games have to be something that sells well? I personally don't. But
I don't. It doesn't have to be very. I think it's really a balance. It should be a balance between violence and content, like with anything else. Asura's Wrath, I believe, was underrated because it was a 6-hour game with half-hour gameplay. The rest were just cutscenes. It was like watching a TV show. But it was stupidly epic for no reason. It wasn't as gory and brutal as God of War or Dante's Inferno, but it was still good. So with that in mind, I don't believe that it has to be very violent to sell. But as long as there's some sort of content there to sell it, it's kind of like when Mortal Kombat first came out. Other fight games we had were Street Fighter. Was very violent. Mortal Kombat had blood, gore, and all that, but people liked it. So the whole hyper-violence of the 90s, that they were so, does violence sell more at the time? Probably. It's really hard. I personally,
on that note, video games, we want it to be an inherently good thing that basically inspires people and protects them from, their whatever their evils are. But in the sense that games are also a product and something that gets marketed. I think those influences play very heavily into, for example, the game examples we brought up today. And so I think, especially with the indie game movement really picking up steam now, no pun intended. Okay. Anyway, with the indie game movement highly developing, you know, I think that there's going to be room for more of the sorts of games that sort of move away from having to rely on hyper-violence in order to tell a good story. So I have hope for, I think, what you were contending, I believe. I'm sorry if I missed the question.
Well,
I'm whispering over the mic.
We've gone in a lot of directions, but yeah, we're definitely touching on that.
Cool.
Yeah, that's...
If you,
yeah. Which was why I like that you included Journey, which is so fantastically far from the guttural violence.
Journey, if you guys have a chance, an hour of your life to spare, check it out on the GDC Vault. Just type in Genova Chen Journey and then watch it, because he gets to exactly that. He said, I was just playing all these games and it was just basically people online killing each other. And I wanted to make a game where it was like the mechanic inspired people to help each other. And he did such a great job with Journey. And it was, okay, I cannot spoil it. Just watch it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's our time for today, so thank you to everybody for showing up. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can see you at PAX East next year too. Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll be sticking around to, like, you know, throw things around.